to the Gore Guide, where we're on a journey to compile the definitive list of gore and splatter films. Today we'll be taking a look at Mindwarp. In the future, life will be a dream and reality a nightmare. Sounds a bit like 2020. There's a bit of confusion about when Mindwarp was officially released. Some reviewers and websites say 91, 92, but the version that I watched at the very end, the copyright said 1990, so I'm going to go with that. Mindwarp is a 1990 film directed by Steve Barnett and written by screenwriting duo John Brancarter and Michael Ferris under the pseudonym Henry Dominic. It stars Bruce Campbell, Angus Scrimm, and Marta Martin. After Evil Dead 1 and 2 put him in the public eye, Bruce Campbell starred in this fairly unheard of horror sci-fi. Mindwarp, also known as Brain Slasher in some parts of the world, was one of just 3 films released through Fangoria's short-lived Fangoria Films label. The other 2 being Children of the Night in 1991 and Severed Ties in 1992. But with 2 big-name horror stars and such a huge horror publication behind it, why is Mindwarp relatively unheard of? Well, let's take a look and find out. In the post-apocalyptic year of 2037, most of the planet has become desolate wasteland scattered with highly radioactive death zones. Judy is bored of her life as a dreamer, living her life through virtual reality.
Everything is fake.
And wants to experience the real world. After a terrible accident, she is cast out into the outland where she meets Stover.
If you don't cover up, you'll die.
He teaches her how to survive in the harsh land, and they begin to fall in love when they are snatched by the crawlers and dragged to their underground lair. Now they are forced to either work and breed with these cannibal mutants or fight for their lives for freedom. The plot is easy and simple to follow, but stems from a fairly original idea for the time.
Infinisynth. More fantastic than fantasy. More real than reality. The ultimate experience is Infinisynth.
It was one of the first films to use simulated reality, or more specifically, being plugged into a mainframe computer to escape reality, years before The Matrix took this concept to the next level. Bruce Campbell and Angus Scrimm are fantastic, as always. Mindwarp was obviously made after Bruce became famous for playing Ash in Evil Dead's Part 1 and 2, but before Army of Darkness, where he really started to settle into his wisecracking B-movie persona that he's become known for.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. See this? This is my boomstick!
So he plays it quite straight here, but he's still good. Angus Scrimm is of course known for playing the tall man in the Phantasm films, but plays a much more sadistic role in this film. Some of the things he does and says are kind of shocking. The lighting in the underground lair is kind of dim and it has a bit of a red hue to it, so it's a little bit difficult to tell how good the makeup and gore effects actually are, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. They don't have to be totally in your face to be effective. And considering that the effects are done by Howard Berger, Robert Kurtzman, and Greg Nicotero, we can rest assured that we're in safe hands. It was actually surprising how much blood was in Mindwarp. It's not a bloodbath by any means, but every now and then there are random bursts of graphic violence that are all the more shocking when compared to the rest of the film, which can be a little slow. And speaking of slow, leads us to the first point here. The pacing in Mindwarp is pretty bad. The first 15 to 20 minutes almost had me reaching for the remote control, they were so slow. Establishing story is all well and good, but it doesn't have to be boring. Marta Martin is okay as the main character, but I found myself tapping my fingers basically waiting for Bruce to turn up. The film improves when he does, but still doesn't really get going until they get dragged underground by the crawlers. There are a couple of twists towards the end that both kind of suck, but if you haven't seen the film and you don't want to hear about them, then you can skip this section because I'm going to get into spoiler territory now. The first one, of course, being that Angus Scrimm's character is Marta Martin's character's dad. I mean, that was obvious that that was going to happen from like 5 minutes into the film.
No.
I've missed you too.
The second one is actually more frustrating. The whole "it was all a dream" scenario is such a cheap and lazy way to end a film. It almost ruins the whole experience when you've invested time into a character and everything that they've experienced and been through, only to find out that none of it actually happened.
None of it was real?
It's very frustrating. The budget was apparently around $1 million, but it's difficult to see where that money was spent. The costumes look thrown together and the props and settings look really fake. It's a B movie, I get it, but a bit more effort could have produced a better looking product. Outworld basically consists of one shack and the same shots of an abandoned mine used over and over and over again. The shots by the icy water and the snow look really good and goes to show that they could have used the location a lot better. The scenes underground are fine, but it's clear why they kept the lighting so dim, because the sets are pretty flimsy. There's a lot of very shaky walls. And finally, while the gore effects are pretty good, the makeup effects for the crawlers could have been done a lot better. It works fine in the dim lighting of the underground lair, but when they get seen in the full light, it's pretty obvious that they're just wearing masks.
Good night, Cornelia.
My personal favourite kill in Mindwarp is when Claude gets her eye plucked out. And then gets thrown into a giant juicer. And everyone drinks her blood out of human skulls. The random acts of violence in Mindwarp are fairly well done and pretty shocking in comparison to the rest of the film, but are not very frequent. So Mindwarp gets 2.5 out of 5 for amount of blood and 2.5 out of 5 for quality of effects. Mindwarp is slow at times, but surprisingly enjoyable, with solid performances by Campbell and Scrimm and some fairly shocking moments.
A life with me in my chambers, ruling beside me, or remaining here, with her, like her. Either way, you will bear my children. No!
The random bursts of graphic violence is probably the reason why the film failed to find an audience. It's too much for the general viewer and not enough for the gorehounds, so it's just kind of wallowed in mild cult status. It could have been trimmed down to an excellent hour-long special, but instead is just a fairly good feature-length film. So, Mindwarp gets 3 out of 5 stars. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on Mindwarp, or if you have any requests for future videos. Join me next time when we'll be taking a look at 2001 Maniacs. There's a link to the trailer in the description below, along with a link to my list of films on Letterboxd. Don't forget to like the film, share, subscribe, and click on the bell to keep up to date with new content. Thanks for watching, and until next video, have a bloody good time.